Welcome to the Midland Money Mindset. This is a podcast that's all about getting your mind right when it comes to all things money. In every episode, we go deep with engaging guests who provide tangible takeaways and a whole lot of joy along the way. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I enjoyed having them. Let's dive into today's show. Well, I have the pleasure today of being with Dr. Cassidy Preston, founder and mental performance coach at CEP Mindset. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Cassidy. I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Larry. I'm happy to be here. And let's dive in.
Yeah, let's do that because as I was mentioning to you before we jumped on here, we have a listenership of entrepreneurs, athletes. So I think mental mindset is so important for all of the above. But before we dive in there, maybe you could just give our listeners a little, 10,000 foot view of, who you are, what brought you to becoming a mental performance coach and founding CEP Mindset.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it brief. I'll go on a few tangents here. The main premise is from my own actual hockey sporting experience. So I'm from a small town in Northern Ontario where I actually grew up playing on frozen lakes and outdoor rinks, right? So I don't have the American dream. I had the Canadian dream, which was to play in the NHL, right? So this is a big goal. And I pursued that goal, worked really hard, played 5 years of junior hockey, but fell short. I did have a cup of coffee at the pro levels and played 5 years of university and really enjoyed my career. But one of the main things was my mental game during that time really kind of plagued me. I get in my own head. I felt the weight of the results, so focused on that, lose sight of like my love of the game, who I was, who do I want to be in my mental game. So I kind of learned, the mindset game the long, hard way myself, got obviously really interested in it. It's like, oh, I'm going to go to school for this. Read hundreds of books, learned from some of the best human performance experts in the world, like Todd Herman and John DeMartini, and then started to cultivate my own mindset training system to help people get dialed in and day out, whether they're elite athletes and professional athletes or entrepreneurs and people in any day life where they just want to have a better mindset, show up as their best self more consistently. So we did that. And I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. And I was like, oh, I'll start my own business. See how this goes. And then, so did that and then created a bit of a team. And it's just been snowballing, the stuff we do works. And if the people do the work, which we have to have the right clients, but when they do the work, they get results and it's been snowballing. And we have one of the larger firms in the world now and continue to go. So that's kind of the short, form of it. It was kind of my own void and need to figure it out for my own self-preservation. And then seeing that there's this big missing gap in the sports world, but even in business and entrepreneur and life in general, a lot of people get consumed by the results and the goals. And we just do all this goal setting, but we don't focus on our mindset and who we want to be in the foundation because that's where it comes from. So that's the note of my story. Yeah.
So obviously, mindset was looking back as you were looking to what you were going to do in your next chapter, right? Mindset was really an important piece and component of your hockey career and, your level of success. And you realize that, why do you think mindset is so important? I mean, I have my own inclinations about why it's so important. And I'm sure you do as well, because you basically took what you were being challenged with personally and now turned it into a career and also a calling, more or less, to help countless others. So why is mindset so important?
Well, I think it's the foundation of where everything else comes from. And you think of like the best athletes in the world, the best entrepreneurs, the best high performers in all areas, they prioritize their mindset first and foremost. Because when you get that right, when you click that in, when you're clear on who you want to be and how you want to show up, everything else flows from there. And one of the issues and challenges is people don't get that. It's like it becomes the last thing they think about. Their priority is, well, I want to achieve results. I want to get this status, achieve these things, get people to say this about me, whatever it is, these external things, which are fine to have as goals and intentions. But then they're like, well, this is the priority. Well, what do I got to do to get that? And the last thing they think, well, who do I want to be? Do I want to be confident? How do I want to show up? But if you leave this last, like, what are the things you might sacrifice? You might start sacrificing your values and who you want to be. And also, you might suffer because then you feel the weight of the results and the pressures, and there's not clarity here. And then you don't end up, you're less likely to actually get the results. So
Hmm.
it's, the reality is the best figure that out and they prioritize it because it helps them achieve their goals. And more importantly, and one of the big things, you enjoy the journey a lot more, right? Like one of the things that tears my heart out, in any area of life, but especially in sports, is like athletes losing the love of the game. They forget
Hmm.
why they were doing it in the first place.
Right.
And when they can stay connected to that and they have a mindset that fosters the love of the game and continues it going, um, everything else, they become more resilient, more confident, and everything else flows from there. The actions and the results come better. Now, it's not like, oh, get the right mindset and guaranteed results. Like, it doesn't work that way. Other factors, like you're not skilled and talented, like you're not going to score goals if you don't have a good shot and don't do the other work. It's not to say it's the only thing that matters, but it's a good priority to prioritize. And the cool thing is, it doesn't have to take a lot of work. It's not like, oh yeah, I got to work 8 hours a day on your mindset. That's ridiculous. Like, you got nothing
Right.
to. So, but yeah, that's one of the ways I say why it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's like the cart and horse analogy, right? What do
Yeah.
you have to put first? I mean,
Mhm.
clearly you have to put the horse first, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if you put the mental mindset first, that helps lead the horse or the carriage, right? And,
Mhm.
and if you don't do the work, maybe you don't get there. But
Yeah.
at least now that with the horse in front, you have a better opportunity of making it there when all's said and done, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Increases your
and
probability. Yeah.
yeah, I'll share with you a funny story with my son a couple of years ago. He was home for break and he's an aspiring hockey player as well. And he was going out to do his workout while he was on break. So there wasn't anybody telling him he had to go. It was him
Mhm.
wanting to go. And he said, all right, got to go to work. And put his bag on his shoulder and left the house. And I was like, oh, that was a weird thing to say. So when he came home, I said, hey, you said you had to go to work. I said, is this starting to feel like a job, like you're not enjoying it anymore? And he said, no, no, not at all. He goes, I was just using that phraseology because I was grabbing my bag and I was leaving the house. He goes, I'm enjoying every minute of it and I wouldn't be doing anything else. I said, well, if as long as that's the case, we're good. The day
Yeah.
it starts feeling like a job is the
Yeah.
day that we have to have a greater conversation. And I think that's what you're referring to, really.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so important. And that's what take it to entrepreneurship. Like, it's Monday. I love Mondays. I love
Right.
coming to work, right? Like, it's
Sure.
and now, even in sport, but in work as well, there's not everything you're gonna love all the time, and some things,
Agreed.
but generally speaking, like the majority of the things, like create a field and a career, and go down a path that is something you generally enjoy for the sake of itself, and then be
Mhm.
strategic ways to from the other results. So yeah, no, it's
Great advice.
love the carrot, love the horse carriage analogy.
Yeah. So, let's talk about youth sports for a minute. You've mentioned that parents often adversely affect their child's mindset without even realizing it. And, I could probably attest to this also because I've seen it happen as well, or at least I think it's happening. What do you wish you could tell sports parents with regard to that and, trying to avoid that? Maybe, some do's and don'ts.
Yeah, so probably the most common and biggest one, I've got a bunch, but one of the
I'm
biggest
sure.
ones is the car ride home. And a lot of parents will make a lot of mistakes on the car ride home. Whether they should even be having a conversation as a whole, there's a whole thing in of itself, and often maybe they shouldn't, or maybe they should wait or find the right time, because it is important for athletes to reflect, especially an elite athlete, one that's trying to improve and grow. They're just there just to be there, like there's just a
Right.
recreation. I'm like, do you really need to have too much of a car ride home? But for the ones that are striving to improve and grow, find the right time. But then the way the conversation should go, and I'm using shoulds there in quotes because it's like the ideal way, is the athlete is leading the reflection. And some parents usually get this and they go, okay, tell me how your day went. What do you think you did well? Or what could you work on? And the athlete's like, I don't know. Like, and then they're like, well, then let me tell you. And then the parent pours into them. It's like, and they
Right.
don't give them and force them. I'll put force in quotes as well, but force them to find a way to reflect and engage and learn to reflect, because a great benefit of sports is self-reflection and self-growth and taking ownership of their experience in their career. And so, but parents are often not aiding and encouraging that enough, and they kind of like interject or give their opinions too much or too quick, and definitely giving them first is the main issue. So instead, it's like, no, okay, I don't know. Well, try to come up with something like this is not an option, and we're going to pay good money and time and energy to do an elite, like an elite level sport. Then we're going to reflect. And now maybe you get a notebook and they do it without the parent or do it at a certain time. Like it doesn't have to be on the car ride home. That's pretty common. But
Hmm.
that's so you got to have a process and get the athlete to engage in it, and they get robbed of that, and then it becomes, oh well, mom and dad's opinion matters most, right? It's not my opinion myself doesn't matter most of the athlete. It's like, everyone else's opinion, and like that's really not good for confidence and self-development and some different things. So now, different degrees of this on ages, and the other caveat or thought process within this is around uh, being too hard or being too easy on themselves. So some athletes are too hard on themselves. And then the
Right.
parents overcompensate and like, oh, well, let me tell you all the great things you did. Don't do that. And because then you're just going to perpetuate them being too hard on themselves. Instead, be like, do you think you're being too hard here? Like, their job
Hmm.
is to accurately reflect, not be too hard, but definitely don't be too easy. And sometimes athletes will be too easy, especially if the parent, and often this might be the dad, being too hard on the kid, you know, constant. And they're like, then they're going to be too easy as a coping mechanism. And so again, your job is, oh, maybe they are being too easy on themselves. Ask them, get them to learn to accurately self-reflect and guide the conversation. It doesn't mean you never give your opinion and share, but taking a different approach to it is really good. And I'll give one other big tip, fundamental, which goes into that main thing we're talking about with why it's so important, is getting parents to reflect on their own mindset and their
Right.
own why they're getting their kid in sport.
Right.
Because and I use this example sometimes where some people, parents will often hire us, me, myself, or one of my coaches to work with, their aspiring kid on their mindset. And some of them hire us just to help the kid get more results. And it's like, so it's like the parent is very much results first, not mindset.
Right.
They're like, so as long as the parents results first, how do they talk to the kid and interact and react and do all these things versus like, no, my priority is I want my child to show up in a better mental state. That's actually what matters most. I want them to learn to better own their capabilities, trust themselves, interact with others and enjoy the experience. And yes, that will lead to results, but that's not the primary thing. And so the
Right.
parents in a better mental state and they see sport as a vehicle to develop life lessons, life skills, leadership, etc. And yeah, it can be lead to external results, but there's this intrinsic meaning and enjoyment and mindset that the athlete gets to develop as well. So when a parent finally clicks on that, then they interact a lot better with the kid in the interactions, and they don't say as many dumb, meaningful, well, but dumb things. And
Right.
and
Makes
the
sense.
car ride home goes smoother as well because again, then you should be, there's another should there, but you should be reflecting on the athlete's mindset as well. Oh, how did you
Right.
show up and carry yourself? So
So
yeah,
my takeaway, yeah, I mean, my takeaway here is that it's complicated,
yeah,
right? You
yeah,
know, you have to find a happy medium, and the whole idea is to get and engage the athlete, your child, in in a meaningful conversation that allows
mhm,
them to look at the situation holistically, so that they can, know how to deal with it, improve, and enforce those areas that are positives, and maybe enhance those areas or negatives. So it doesn't sound
mhm.
like an easy thing. But the thing I didn't hear you say, which I know a bunch of parents do, is I didn't hear you say pay for goals.
Yeah,
That's a whole nother, I think, undermining situation when it comes to
yeah,
hockey in particular and other sports where they're
yeah,
goal oriented, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I didn't hear that. So keep that
mhm,
in mind, parents. Um,
yeah.
at the end, I think you have to be prepared, right, to win at the mental game. And
Mm,
I think, like you alluded to, or maybe even said it straightforward, right? The mental game isn't about necessarily getting results right away. It's about kind of changing your framework and the way you're looking and thinking about things, which ultimately have the result impact, right, when
mhm.
that's all said and done. So what are three steps, whether you're a parent of an athlete, whether you're an athlete or an entrepreneur, what are three steps that somebody can use to help work towards winning the mental game?
Yeah. So the three steps we like to use are first and foremost an assessment kind of idea. It's like, well, think of like building a brick house. You need a blueprint. It's like, where are you at? What are your strengths and what can you work on and grow? And it's all subjective, but it's like, okay, well, what am I working on? And we need common language and priorities within the mental game. And so that's what we do with athletes often is that. So it's like, okay, well, my priorities are trust myself more confidence, more attack mode, more composure, whatever the different mental skills are for that athlete or that person. Then step two is start to personalize the concepts and the strategies. So we have different principles around like acceptance, commitment, centeredness, enjoyment, and then we bring those to life through strategies like an alter ego, reset routine, personal scorecard, and mental prep exercises using imagery and coping planning. And there's a bunch of other stuff we do. But the idea is like, okay, well, let's find the strategies that work for you, and you gotta play with it, because it's not like it can't be cookie cutter, like can't be just
Right.
fluffy stuff. It's got to be practical and personalized. That then it's like, yeah, this is my mental game plan, and then you start getting momentum in this stage. And then the third step is like, well, then keep refining and upgrading, because it's not like, oh, well, I did my 2 months and really focused on my mindset, my mental game, I'm good now. Like, now I don't have to do it anymore. It's like, no, this is a never ending thing. Like, we all got to keep reflecting and learning and growing. And
Yeah, the saw always needs to be sharpened at some point if you use it
yeah,
a lot, right?
yeah, exactly. So it's just got to stay on top of it. And sometimes you got to evolve and change things based on a new landscape or a new environment. And so that's the third general stage, is like, well, now keep tweaking, refining it. And having third party sounding boards to guide you through that can be very helpful. And, but yeah, those are the general three stages or
Yeah,
steps.
so I mean, yeah, thinking about that, right? And what we talked about earlier about results driven, I think I heard you share, one of your key strategies is to stop obsessing over results. And we kind of hit on that a little bit when we were talking about the kids and the car ride home, if you will.
Yeah.
Why is it so important to avoid the results trap? And how do people go about doing that? Because I think most people are results oriented, right? They want to change something, and they want to develop something, they want to improve it, and they want to see that change right away, right? Same reason why people join the gym on January 1st, and come
Mhm.
March 1st they're not going to the gym. So
Yeah.
I mean, is that inherently the problem right there in a nutshell? Or
Yeah.
and how do people get out of that and avoid it?
Yeah. So the results trap and this results first mindset I'll refer to often is very common. And there's nothing inherently wrong with, again, setting goals and being results driven when it's your primary and main focus and main mindset and your main mental state. Oh, my mindset is good because I set ambitious goals. Like, and I focus on goals all the time. Well, it might work for you, but you
Mhm.
might sacrifice your values at some point. You might sacrifice who you're being. You might not enjoy the journey as much, and at some point, it can definitely probably work against you. And for most people, so there's a different way to do it. So it's not like it's inherently wrong, and sometimes it works. Meaning, like, you can climb the ranks pretty good just being so obsessed by results, and only obsessed by results is actually probably a better way to say it. Whereas when we get someone to break free of that or look at it differently and how to overcome that, is, yeah, you can still really want the goals, right? And achieve those outcomes and want to get to the NHL. I don't want you to want it less. That would be ridiculous. I
Right.
want you to be less driven to achieve your external goals. Like, no, I don't want you to be less driven. I want you to shift your mindset to prioritize how you're showing up and who you're being and the process and the journey. And it's such common language and cliche, like focus on the process over the results. Everybody says it. Like, focus on your
Right.
mindset over the result. Like, it leads to the process leads to the results. But the problem with that statement is, oh, I'm going to focus on the process so that I can get results. Well, then are you really actually going to focus much on the process? It's like, so, and a lot of people end up not doing it or doing it well. And then they sacrifice the process because it's like, yeah, well, I only really cared about it so I can get this. And it's
Right.
like, no, learn to care about the process for the sake of itself. Again, it's not decreasing our drive for this, but we're increasing our attention and focus and understanding of the importance in and of itself of our mindset, of our process, on who we want to be and how we want to show up. So that's how we start
I
to break free. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love that. And, as you were talking about that, it reminded me of one of the reasons why I started my own firm, because
Yeah.
one of the things that was happening with me working in a big firm environment was they were always talking about us, or we should be focused on taking care of the families in the best
Mm,
way possible, as a fiduciary. And when all said and done, at the end of the day, all they wanted to know was, how much revenue are you driving for the firm? And I was
mm,
like, well, they're kind of counteracting, right?
yeah,
Because what do you want us to focus on? They're two very different things. And what
mm,
we've created here is we're solely focused on helping the families we serve. And our
mm,
belief is everything else will follow, right? And
mm,
I think that's like a prime example of what you're talking about. Follow that process, take care of those families, the
yeah,
revenue, take care of that mindset, the results will end up coming. Don't focus, you don't have to focus on that
yeah.
end result, so to speak.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we even do that even with my own company because it's like, we have to track sales and we don't have, if we
Sure.
don't make sales, then we don't have a business. And we don't,
You're not a nonprofit, right?
yeah, yeah. So, and it's like, but it's like, well, when we get to sell, we get to now impact people and connect with
Sure.
people. There's an intrinsic driver, and that allows us to get more people and interact and get better at what we do. So, there is external goals and intent, but like, and that they're tracked and measured, but and we try to consistently, weekly, even connect them back to the intrinsic, let alone daily, intrinsic why we're doing it in the first place. And you keep that loud and clear, versus it often gets watered down, especially in a big organization, and the leveling and maybe the messaging and how it was built, and this is awfully. I would also maybe highlight, it's not like a new way to think, because it's not like, oh, no one ever thought this way before, but our society and the way it was built, especially Western society, was very results oriented. Like, go to
Sure.
work, do this, like, is very like, more transactional that way.
Mhm.
And but it's not serving a lot of people right now, especially with in the way the culture is going. So, and it doesn't really serve high performance, right? People that want
Right.
to have the maximal impact, you're not going to do that generally, overly just consumed by results and in that results trap. So it doesn't mean to
Yeah.
not have it and don't care. It just means looking at it differently. And so it's very new that way, but these philosophies have been around,
Sure.
for a
Yeah.
long time.
So along these same lines, you talk about the me versus me mentality. How can people use that to succeed? How can they utilize that to their advantage?
Yeah, it's a nice little saying. One of my pro soccer players, kind of, we like to use it a lot. And the idea is like, instead of like, oh, it's me versus everyone else, and constant comparison and external result stuff, and then all of the challenges that can come from that. And it doesn't mean you should never compare yourself to other people, because you naturally will. You want to do it in a healthy way when you do it.
Mhm.
But the priority is like, well, am I getting better than I was yesterday? Am I getting better at my mindset? Right? We get pretty much every athlete to come up with this personal definition of success, or their personal scorecard. Right? So every day, and after every reflection as an athlete or as an entrepreneur, is like, hey, here's the things that we're going to define success for you. Right? What is it like? What are the measures that are more intrinsic on, what does it mean to show up and do well at your job? Like, you got to
Sure.
define that. And so the without that, then you're going to end up being too much of the external comparison, and you lose sight of who do you want to be. So it's just another way
Right.
to get more clarity on that, and focus on this and not get caught up in all the noise.
Are you familiar with Dan Sullivan and the gap and the gain? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so I think that's a great,
yeah.
tool to utilize, because I think we all get kind of hung up on looking at the gap of where we want to be and how far away that is, instead of
Mm,
looking over our shoulder and seeing where we were a year or two ago and that gain that we accomplished over that period of time. And,
yeah,
doing that self-reflection of us against us and where we are in that continuum, because that gap is going to continue, right? It's going to continue to get bigger as you get better, as you improve. You're going to, put those goals further out and make them even larger and more, harder to obtain. So it's important that you keep track of that gain and not necessarily focus on the gap, which seems very similar to kind of what you're, talking about. A lot of
yeah,
these things are not, they're tried and true, they're old, but
yeah,
we all lose focus of them a lot.
yeah. No, for sure.
So, So you also talk about breathing, being a fundamental strategy for helping with your mental state. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so breath work and in generally our breath is a great way to get present. So it's one of our core strategies is called a reset routine, which uses acceptance, which is a way to let go of the noise and deal with things and see them what they are. I call it a superpower because some people misunderstand it and think, oh, acceptance means we don't care. I'm like, no, no, no. Like we still
Mhm.
care. Like we're just
Right.
accepting and seeing things for what they are. And then so that's the A, and then we B breathe, which allows us, if we want to be in a calm mental state, one of the best ways to do that is calm our body. It will actually help calm your mind. Your mind and body are highly connected. So whether that's diaphragmatic breathing or box breathing, there's a psychological sigh that you can induce. There's all kinds of different variations, but finding one that works for you. And it's why meditation can be great too. It's practicing being mindful, and which is everything we're talking about is mindfulness. And um, and so that's a core piece. So we accept, then we breathe and get centered and grounded and present, and then we commit. And that's now the 1-2 punch of acceptance commitment. Commit to who do you want to be? How do you want to move forward? And what's the next thing? And how do you want to show up? And that clarity in your mind is very helpful. But it starts with, and the thing most people struggle with is the acceptance piece. And the breathing actually can help with acceptance. And the breathing helps bridge this, okay, accepting, clearing, getting present so that you can now commit. Because people generally get commitment, but often they're committed to what? Results. No, no, I want you to be
Right.
committed to the process, to your mindset, to who you want to be, and be really clearly committed, not partially. One of the analogies I like to use is like jumping into the water. It's like you're at a cottage. Some people are partially committed. They put the toe in and they get out and they're standing
Right.
on the dock. Like it's cold. It's like, no, no, jump in the water, commit.
Right.
And that's the kind of commitment we're talking about. And you do that better when you accept, breathe, and then just commit and you go. So that's how I like to talk about breathing, how it ties into one of our core strategies as well.
Yeah, I love it. That's definitely very helpful. So let's talk about the mental toughness playbook now. That's something you developed. Why did you develop it, and how can listeners utilize it?
Yeah, so that was one I was doing for coaches, and so I've done lots of work with coaches, obviously lots of work with athletes, and lots of work with parents, and I have resources for them available as well. And the idea is just like getting people, particularly people in leadership positions, to better understand what's going on with your athletes and their mindset. And so that was like, oh, well, here's your playbook. You've got your playbook for all your X's and O's, but like let's give coaches a playbook on the mental game. And so it breaks down a lot of what we've already covered today, and giving coaches some resources on how to assess, how to then work with an athlete on that, how to work on some of those strategies and concepts, and then to keep doing the work. And we do a lot of the beyond the X's and O's is another thing that we do on our website and podcast, and just getting coaches to reflect and leaders to reflect on thinking outside of just the strategic hard parts of the game, but the more intangible and mindset
Right.
and human skills. So that was I think we did that about 2 years ago now. We
So
started
how
doing it.
does I know you have the book Mindset First.
Yeah.
Is that a companion to the mental toughness playbook, or is that a separate audience that you're
Yeah, no,
looking to
it's
cater
my
to with that?
first. Yeah, it's my first main book is Mindset First. The Mental Toughness Playbook was more of like a small workshop based thing for cohort for coaches, whereas the Mindset First is the main now go to. Like you're looking for something to like read and get into, go Mindset First. Like it has the stuff in that other template, and it's expanded on it. It's about 150 pages, small little, pretty nothing too robust, but it's meant to
Right.
be concise, practical, engaging, get to the point, help people, get real value in a big, big punch with a, packs a big punch for its weight kind of idea. So
Right. All
that,
right.
that's
Great.
the,
Well,
that's the main book to get. Whereas that other one was one of the initial ones, just helping coaches more directly. It was a workshop based.
amazing.
Yeah.
So you talk about the overthinking paradox.
Mhm.
Maybe can you explain what this is and why overcoming it is so important for success?
Yeah, love to. And I think it's funny because I think the financial world, it's an interesting one to think about overthinking too. So, because sometimes it pays to overthink and overly double check things 5 times to a degree, right? Like it's like your accountant is like, yeah, no, I want to double check those numbers like 5 times.
Right.
But sometimes we get into the overthinking paradox and the rabbit hole and we can't get out. And it's like, I got to think my way out of overthinking. It doesn't work that way. And the contrast of decision making model that I like to use and help, high performers, athletes, because sometimes it's not just a intellectual problem that we're solving, like numbers, right? And
Hmm.
think of an athlete, they're on a 2-on-1, should I shoot or pass? Like there's no right, and I'll put right in quotes, decision. And it's like I gotta think what's right. That player's screwed. Like it's not gonna go so well. It's they gotta do what they feel is best. So feel instead of think, and best instead of right. And this different narrative serves because it's more intuition based. It's still thinking and decision making going on, but there's a more intuition based where you're trusting the feeling that you want and to use to make that decision. And like you could shoot or pass, and both are pretty good. Well, which one feels best for you? Versus, oh my God, one's
Right.
right and one's wrong. Like it creates all this, internal doubt and noise in your head. So that's the fundamental way to look at the overthinking paradox, is like trying to be perfect, trying to be right, etc. Well, sometimes when you're doing taxes, you might want to be pretty, you don't want to
Right.
know, I
Yeah.
missed a
Listen,
line item.
there's
Like,
certainly certain instances that you want to be able to do that. And then
yeah,
there are instances like when
yeah,
you're on a 2-on-1, like you're
yeah,
mentioning, that
yeah,
you don't even have time to go through that whole thought process. And if you do, and you go through that whole thought process, chances
yeah,
are you are going to make the wrong
yeah,
decision, because
yeah,
you will have missed the opportunity to make a decision in a lot of those
exactly.
cases.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's very difficult, and great advice, and,
yeah,
and you have to be able to put yourself in as many of those situations as you possibly can, whether it be a 2-on-1, a business opportunity, what have you,
yeah,
so that you're comfortable with, and you know what the various outcomes are and what your percentages of success will be based upon those different situations well before you even are in the situation, right?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you can learn from it now by being in
Right.
it, and you can learn from it better when you're doing what you feel is best versus like, oh, I'm trying to be right, and now you're overthinking. Well, now you get to learn about it's a mental mistake, which is great too. But it's like, I'll
Right.
call it what it is. You made a mental mistake. You were overthinking, like in a business meeting or whatever, and it's like, oh, I stuttered through that whole thing, like, or I, I didn't pull the trigger, whatever it ends up being. So, yeah, that narrative works really good, and a couple ways to look at that as well. One of the best ways to minimize overthinking from a proactive approach is to think more before, right?
Right.
Because the more you mentally rehearse, well, how could this meeting go? How could that 2-on-1 go? And how do I want to show up? Well, now you're more likely to do that versus if like you're not mentally prepared, then you go up and your mind starts overthinking. And one of my coaches and right hand guy, Nicholas, is a great analogy around overthinking is often just your mind trying to plan on the spot. But it's doing
Hmm.
it more in the subconscious. And it's like, oh,
Great
these options,
analogy.
what could happen? And it's trying to plan. It doesn't do a good job at planning. And it's definitely not while you're in the spot. So if you plan before, more consciously think more before, you'll think less during those key moments, and you'll just trust and be and do what you feel is best. So
Great
those are
advice.
my
Great advice. Well, Dr. Cassidy, we've spent a good amount of time here, where
mm,
we are the Midland Money Mindset. We're all about joy on this show. And I
mm.
think a lot of these tools that you talk about will bring people joy, more joy than perhaps maybe they're having now. But we ask each of our guests the same final question when we want to know, what did you do today that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
Oh, well, what did I do today? Well, I did actually had a really good conversation with my number Nick, just managing my own overthinking about like my upcoming book, which will be live when this airs. So, um, and just dealing with like there's just a lot going on in my work life and all these new things. So, it's just being able to have that clarity and walk through that and have that sounding board for me was very helpful today. And then so that was fun. And then I got to go and do after that. I'm working on doing the audio recording for the book too.
Oh, wow.
So it's fun. So it
Good
was
for
a busy
you.
day, and then I get to join this, which is obviously
Yeah.
very fun as
I know.
well.
I did the audio recording for my book that we released earlier this year, so I know the endeavor there, and I wish you all the luck. It's just make sure you have the right mic plugged in the first time, because I did a 2-chapter test, and
Ooh,
my computer did a like a reboot because it had to do an update. And when I went to do the test recording,
yeah,
it recorded through my webcam mic instead of my real like podcast
yeah,
mic, so the
yeah,
sound quality was horrible. I
yeah,
did two. Oh, luckily I only did 2 chapters, sent it to the folks, the editors, and they're
yeah.
like, this is terrible, you have to do it again. And I wasn't too happy about it, but in the end it was well worth it. So my
Yeah,
advice to you on that is just make sure you have the right mic for
yeah,
the for when you're recording, because
yeah. I've been double checking. I'll keep double
yeah,
checking. I just got
yeah, I
started
always do.
today.
Don't
I just
overthink it though. Don't overthink
don't overthink.
it.
I was overthinking a
uh,
couple times during today, but I got
there you
through
go. So, Doctor, it's been a pleasure having you on. We're going to have all of your information in the show notes, including the information for your latest book, Mindset First. But if people want to learn more about you, connect with you, find out more about what you're up to, what's the easiest and the best place for them to do that?
So my new website is drcassidypreston.com. So that's the easiest. You can also find out more about my team of mental performance coaches at cepmindset.com. And on social media, I'm on Twitter at Cassidy Preston, Instagram, CP Mindset. So if you just Google my name, I'm sure you'll find some different ways to get a hold of me. And yeah, love to hear what people got out of today's episode. Love to connect online. And obviously, you're interested, you can find out more about our work and the book at drcassidypreston.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it greatly. Appreciate the time, and enjoy the day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Larry.